Hi everyone! I hope you're all having a great week. For my project this week, I was in the mood to create something with bright and bold colors. So I went hunting for some inspiration on Pinterest and I found this image of a beautiful rock pathway, and I thought I would try to recreate it, but instead of using really neutral earth tones, I would recreate it using bright colors. As I've mentioned before, when I'm working using a reference photo, I use the photo initially to help me create a few marks just as guides, and then once I've got my marks down on paper, I tend to walk away from the image and just let my imagination do the rest. The image was the starting point for my project, but in my mind I had an idea of the kind of palette I wanted to use because, like I've mentioned, I wanted to use some really bright colors. My intention was to use this bright yellow that you're seeing on the bigger rocks, and then to have some pinks and purples and maybe some other bright colors in between. But then I started working, and the first thing I did was put the yellow in between those bigger quote unquote rocks. So, right from the get-go, I didn't start off doing what I thought I would do. So instead of trying to correct that, I just decided to go with it. Little projects like this one are about experimenting, trying to be as free-flowing as possible in my process, and mostly, I want it to be fun. I don't want to create a project that's going to be stressful. I just want to do something that's going to help me play with color and create some little shapes and forms that are going to help me really stay in the moment and focus on what I'm doing. When I was in the first grade at school, one of my teachers told me, or I guess my teacher at the time told me, that it was wrong to color outside the lines. So I'm here to tell you there's nothing wrong with coloring outside the lines. And in fact, I created lines here and they were only to be used as guides. So even though my colors here are blending into the other color and they're going outside the lines that I've created, this is completely fine. And I hope that when you're creating little projects like this one, that you can also find a way to create that freedom for yourself. This is art. It is meant to be playful, it is meant to be relaxing, and in that way it's also going to be therapeutic. When we start to add pressures for things to be a certain way and to not go outside the lines and to follow too many rules, it starts to become more rigid, and then it takes away some of that fun of the creative process. So be bold and be okay with the idea of going outside what people consider to be the right way to do things. I like to create my own way, and that means I don't follow rules necessarily when I'm creating. And because I can do this, because I'm giving myself that permission, I'm also giving myself permission to play and explore, to make quote unquote mistakes. And in making those little discoveries, which I prefer to call them, I am learning. So if I never tried to do something out of the norm or out of what would be considered the way to do things, I probably wouldn't be learning quite as much as I am when I'm doing this. So I hope that this can encourage you to also step outside those boundaries and to give yourself permission to really explore and experiment and try things that some people might consider wrong. But hey, this is art. You're not breaking the law. You're you're not doing anything morally wrong. You're just really experimenting and having fun, and there's really nothing wrong with doing that. And when we can give ourselves that permission, I swear to you, it makes the creative process so much more freeing and fun. Because I'm giving myself permission to create and experiment with my paints, and just, be free and not attached to certain rules, the process is going to look messy. But I'm here to tell you that even if I were trying to follow certain rules, it would probably still look a little bit messy. That's just a normal thing in the creative process. There always seems to be a phase in your painting process where the painting doesn't seem to look quite like you'd like it to. And I always call it like the ugly phase of the process. It's that part of the process where you almost feel like giving up because you feel like it's just not going in the right direction. But really, this is the time to actually stick it out, because if you can stick it out, you can take it beyond this phase and get to that place where you feel more comfortable with your painting. It's also a good idea in these circumstances for me to check in with myself, because sometimes it's not just about what's going on with the painting, but maybe what's going on with me. So when I say I like to check in with myself, I like to really stop, take a moment to ask myself what's going on inside me. Maybe I'm feeling tired. Maybe I'm not feeling well, or maybe something happened that was upsetting to me and I'm just in a space where it's really hard for me to look at what's in front of me and be appreciative of it. So in those circumstances, after I've checked in with myself to see what's going on, I ask myself, what do I need right now? Sometimes that answer will be, I want to keep painting because I think it'll help me just process what's going on and be in the present moment. And maybe in doing so, I'll be able to feel better about everything. Other times, however, the answer might be, I need some sleep, or I need some rest, or I need to go outside and take a walk and get some fresh air. The reason I mention all of this is that sometimes we are just not in the best headspace or body space to actually feel comfortable creating. And that's because our bodies or our souls need something else. And it's good and important even for us to really pay attention to the cues that our bodies are giving us and to honor what it is we need at that time. So, when we can give ourselves the permission to step away from a painting, oftentimes we'll come back to the painting process and be more ready and prepared to move on to the next phase. And oftentimes, for me anyway, when I step away from a painting, if I don't feel like it's going in the direction that I'd like it to go because I'm either tired or not feeling well or something else is upsetting me, then oftentimes I'll have more ideas, and because I've given myself a chance to actually get what it was that I really needed at that time, I've also given myself the space to let my imagination come back to life. The creative process can be a great way to give ourselves a much needed escape at times. However, it's important to make sure that we're not escaping things that we do need to take care of. And so that's why it's always good for me to check in with myself to see what's going on and to ask myself what it is I need, because maybe I'll realize that there are things that are important for me to tend to. And though using creativity as a means of therapy, if you will, can be a really good thing to do, it's also not good for us to ignore the things that we really need. And sometimes it's just better for us to get a little bit of rest or time for recuperation if we're dealing with illness than it is for us to actually be creating. And that's not because we don't like creating. Creating is, when it's something we enjoy, it can be so helpful for us to do it. But we have to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves entirely, not just looking after certain parts of ourselves. When I'm working with bright and bold colors, I always like to include some neutral colors because they help to keep the painting more balanced. As I go along, I work on building that balance between brights and neutrals by intensifying my colors layer by layer. When I'm happy with a layer, I like to let it dry and then I start working on intensifying some of my colors. At this point, I'm really liking the way my colors are starting to look, but I want to add a little bit more color contrast. And a great way to do it is by adding a complementary color. And this cobalt teal light is just the right color to do so. I really like this color and I think it complements the colors in the painting really well. So I'll add a few little washes of it here and there in the painting without going overboard. And a little bit later in my process, I'll add more of it in its less diluted form so that it can really pop against those other colors. Using a little bit of neutral tint around the bigger shapes in my painting will help define them better. I'm ready to start drawing some little stones in my little rocky pathway. And so I pulled out my fountain pen and I'm going to start working on adding these shapes. Because I worked in the middle section or in between my bigger rocks with a bunch of different colors like that teal color mixed in with a little bit of that quinacridone deep gold and some of that nickel azo yellow. It's created the look of some striated rocks, and I really like this effect. And it feels a little bit more to me the way rocks do look in nature. I know it's not exactly how rocks look in nature, but it sort of replicates that effect, and I think it looks neat in a painting like this. Once I'm done drawing in all of my little stones, I also go in with my fountain pen to add a little bit of black in between the stones, and this helps to make them a little bit more defined and it helps them stand out in the painting. When I'm not quite sure if the values in my painting are quite right, I like to take a picture of my painting at a particular stage in it and then switch the settings so that it's black and white. And this gives me a better perspective as to the amount of value contrast I have in my painting. I see that I do have some dark darks and I have some really light colors, but I may need a little bit more light contrast, and so I'm adding this white. Using black and white in a painting is really a great way to make the colors in a painting stand out. Now I'll work on adding some more defined pops of color using some cobalt teal light in its less diluted form so that it's very opaque and colors the rocks that I'm going to paint. If you're familiar with my painting process at all, you're probably pretty aware that I love star gold. So Of course, I have to add some star gold in this painting, and I really love to add it in areas where I know it's going to shine its best. Next to that cobalt teal light is a great place to put that star gold because the two of them work magically together. I also really love working with this fine tip black pen in order to add simple little details like vertical lines and dotting. When I'm working on adding these little details, I really am not following any specific rule. I like to just follow my intuition and put them where I feel they might work the best. When I'm working on little projects like this, because they're so relaxing and so good at helping me stay in the present moment, time seems to just fly by and I'm already done. Star Gold and my bright color palette really make me happy, so it's not surprising to me that I tend to reach out for them as often as I can. Just look at how well these colors work together. It's almost impossible not to smile looking at them. Every week when I'm reading through your comments on my videos, I can't help but feel so much joy. I feel so blessed for all the kindness you extend to me, and I am so thankful for all your encouragements and support. So again, a great big thank you for that. Since we're heading into winter and the holiday season, next week I'll be switching things up for you with a fun little winter themed card front project. Until then, I hope you have a wonderful week and happy creating!